Good morning and welcome to the Hershey's Mill Nature Group Introduction to Summer Birds, presented by Christine McCormick. Christine is the chair of the Hershey's Mill Nature Group, and this is the conclusion to the Hershey's Mill winter series, winter Zoom series. And Christine, take it away.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, today we're going to talk about the summer birds, and then I'll also talk about birds of prey. There we go. And I'm going to start off with the ruby-throated hummingbird because everybody can recognize a hummingbird, I think, if you happen to be able to see them in the first place. They're very tiny and their wings beat very, very fast. But just put out a little sugar water and you don't even have to color it red, and they'll be coming to your deck. They are amazing. They fly up to 60 miles per hour and migrate 2,000 miles and are probably on their way back, but we won't be seeing them probably until mid-April. I always talk about recognizing birds by their beak, so I think that you would easily say the ruby-throated hummingbird has the longest slender beak. They're always in motion, and they get nectar from flowers and also some nutrients as well. But I was amazed, and this happened more in the winter or as fall comes, looking up at the tall spruce trees that I have outside the house. There was hummingbirds at the very top, and I was just astounded. But actually, they go up there and just search out insects to get the protein that they need for their long, long migration. So if you don't see them at flowers, or you see something funny up at the top of a tree, even though they're tiny, you can't miss recognizing them. That's a hummingbird. If you happen to go to Phoenix for the winter or the desert area, there's many different species of hummingbirds. We only unfortunately have one. So as a beginner, that should be no problem. I also want to talk about another very common thing that is no problem, which is our robin. I put it here next to the bluebird, which everybody notices, or if they see them for the first time, can't fail to remark upon them. But the robin is bigger than the bluebird. They're related. They're both thrushes. They have similar length beak, similar kind of beak. The robin's obviously being a little longer. And you frequently hear people, or I've been hearing people say, oh, it's spring because the robins are back. And then when I was growing up, it was pretty true that the robins came back in the spring. And I lived in other places further north where the robins came back in the spring. But actually, robins were kind of at the northern end of where the robins do overwinter, but they go more into the woods. Their normal feeding habit is you see them going after worms in the ground, and in the wintertime, obviously, the ground is frozen. So they tend to go into the woods to look for other kinds of food sources. I have a crabapple tree outside my window, which has a nice, good supply of fruit. And pretty much until like last month, the robins were here every night getting the latest in their crabapple meal. So yes, the robins are here all winter, but you will see them more frequently as spring and summer come. And in fact, some will come back north. They do slide a little bit south, but you can't miss them. Okay, two other kinds of thrushes are the I like these because they're kind of like robin looking. They're thrushes, right shape, same length of tail, but they're sleeker. I consider them even more handsome. The mockingbird is not that common here. We're really at a very northern end of its distribution. And I was kind of surprised at that, having lived in Maryland for many years and having one that just would never leave me alone, actually. But we do see them here, tend to be more in the wooded areas. I see them over in the Yardley, Ulster area more than over on this side of Hershey's, Ashton side of Hershey's Mill. But what I do see very frequently is the catbird. And you can tell the catbird is all gray with a charcoal kind of cap, whereas the mockingbird has a white breast, and when it flies, it has white wing patches. The catbird is not here very commonly in the winter at all. It pretty much disappears. You might see a single stray here and there. Both of them eat half fruits and half insects, and we'll see more of them in the summer. Also about the size, hard to miss, are the blackbirds. In the summertime, in fact, they are here all winter, but like the robins, they tend to go into the woods, or the blackbirds even form flocks of multiple different species of blackbirds. You will find the a red-winged blackbird, the grackles, sort of gathering together, even with the cowbirds, which I'm not going to talk about for the introduction, because the grackles are very handsome. They're iridescent kind of shading on their black feathers, whereas the red-winged blackbird, these are the males, would have the shoulder patches of red and yellow, the female being more mottled brown, not quite as striking. You can see this picture. I want to point out that most of these pictures in this presentation were taken by Hershey's Mill photographers. We are getting a bigger and bigger collection, so that hopefully we'll have all of them by Hershey's Mill photographers. But I want to thank the photographers and encourage other people to take pictures as well. But the one taken over by the garden area is a red-winged blackbird. You can see him with his shoulder bands. And that's a frequent place to find them. They're around the water when they're nesting. In fact, I've seen one very regularly on the wooded wetland areas, which is south of the lagoon. And he's getting ready to find a mate and have a nest down in that area. Whereas the grackles you'll see more in the lawn areas. So it's you look to what the bird looks like and where you're seeing it sometimes. Carolina wrens are the very cute little tiny birds with a big tail, long slender beak. Again, this would be longer than a thrush's beak. They tend to eat insects. And we'll have two kinds here in the summer. One is called the house wren. It's very common and extremely noisy. They will go into our what we call bluebird boxes, but we're trying to call it nest boxes because they do serve a number of other species besides the bluebirds. And the house wrens build a nest that is just amazingly haphazard to me. They'll fill the entire box with sticks and only use the very top part of it. And if you happen to have a little family of them nearby, which I did one summer, you will not be able to forget that they're there. The Carolina wren is prettier and much more melodic, but it prefers to be in the woods, and there are not as many of them. But I will also say, if you're walking along one of the water trails and one of them is there, they do have a very loud voice, and you will hear it, and you can try and find it, and I have, especially if you look along the shrubby layer of the woods and try and tune into that noise. You'll find it sitting there. We had over the winter, I just want to mention, there's a bird called a winter wren that lives here in the winter but goes away in the summer. So they kind of trade places. Sparrows, again, like the wrens, we have some that trade places. The white throat I talked about that was here in the winter will be leaving, but the chipping sparrow will be coming in greater abundance. They're here rarely in the winter. And the song sparrow. Chipping sparrow showing off his identifying feature here on the left-hand picture with his chestnut head covering. And here's a side profile of him. Very handsome bird, very small bird, actually. And generally, I see them foraging just on the ground level. They'll be, if not so much in the grassy area, but like through your garden edges where it's mulched or maybe a little bare, they'll be looking for insects down there. Whereas the song sparrow, you'll see, has a very speckled breast. The chipping is plain white, speckled breast, and an eye line. A lot of the sparrows do have an eye line. And you can't see it in this picture, but frequently they'll have a nice brown spot on their breast to pick them out. And I tend to see those, they'll be around the lagoon in the brushy area and down in the little pond south of the lagoon. But I want to point out, in that same area, we have a pretty big population of house sparrows, which are not really sparrows, they're finches. Take a good look at the comparison of the depth of their beak. The house sparrow is a little deeper than the actual sparrows. House sparrows are not native. They're considered to be an invasive species. They are one of 2 species that are not protected by the Federal Migratory Bird Act. So when we're monitoring nest boxes, it's perfectly legal for people to destroy the nests and even the eggs of the house sparrows, because they do tend to overpopulate the area. And we try and keep that population down, which I will say we have been very successful in doing over the last year in terms of keeping the nest boxes free for the more native songbirds that we like to have use them. And then there is the wonderful warblers, are again very small, with a very small, slender beak, but short. And they have, they're mostly migratory. Not too many of them stay here all summer. And we definitely, very few are here in the winter. One I have shown here, the yellow-rumped warbler, does have a few birds will hang around in the winter, but they're extremely rare. The yellow warbler will be here throughout the summertime. The yellow-rumped is mostly seen, few in the winter, but mostly during the migration periods. They'll disappear in the summer completely. But I did see one. They're not here in the winter, they're not here in the summer, but they're pretty dominant most of the years. And I did see one just last week. So keep your eyes open for this yellow spot. They also have a kind of flecked breast, which not too many of the warblers have, but these would be the 2 most common. And there's more than a dozen potentials. So keep your eyes really peeled during the migration season, which is coming up. And then the last group I'm going to talk about that we see in the summer are the swallows and the swifts. These birds forage in the air. They catch flying insects. And there are 3 different kinds that, well, actually there are 4, but 3 of them that are more common or have been more common. I'll talk about the 4th in a bit, but the easiest way to tell them apart is by the shape. They're always flying. They hardly ever sit still. So if you see them, get a good idea of what the shape looks like. The most common that we have is the tree swallow. It has a fan tail. You see that it's pretty solid and just spread out. Whereas the barn swallow, although it's distinctive with its yellow or orange throat as opposed to the white throat on the tree sparrow, the easiest way to tell it, when you see it mostly in flight, is by the swallow tail. And my phone would have to ring. Sorry. Okay, that's what happens when you're at home. Okay, the swallowtail is the barn swallow. And the last one is the chimney swift, which we see frequently in the summertime. And I recognize that. I read somewhere that it looks like a flying cigar. And I think that is the best description you could possibly have of it. It's a cigar with these long, smooth wings. They're very common in the summer too. I want to point out that the tree swallows not only fly over the lagoon searching for insects, but they also are one of the birds that nest in our nest boxes, and we very much welcome them. They, even if they and a bluebird are kind of competing for a box, if we have a second box very close by, they get along with each other. So they're some of our favorites. Last year, we were visited by purple martins. There is a purple martin house in the garden area that was only occupied by our friendly house sparrows for years and years. But last year, we actually did have some purple martins come in. And I don't have a picture of them here, but they forage as the other swallows and swifts, but they're bigger and they're pretty much completely black. So I think you'll be able to tell those easily if we're fortunate enough to have them come back this winter. So those are the birds that you should be looking for this summer. And I do hope that you will join the bird walks that we have scheduled. If we get overpopulated in bird walks, we're limiting them to like 15 people each. Well, that'll only mean that we get to have more bird walks. So please pay attention to those. The other group I want to talk about are the birds of prey. These are the birds generally that feed on animals larger than insects and invertebrates. They fish and rodents pretty much, also birds. So just talk about a few of those. One that you will not see that often, but here at night, if you happen to be awake, is the great horned owl. It's very large, and its horns are not horns really, they're just feather tufts. It has a white collar, which you can hardly see here, but very large orange eyes. Usually if you see it during the day, it won't have its eyes open, but these photographs taken here in Hershey's Mill, you can see that they have orange eyes. They're present all year, but more are here in the winter, as happens frequently. They'll just like slide down from other northern areas where it's not so such a nice place to be for the winter. And frequently they'll be in coniferous trees at night, but you can see sometimes they'll land on somebody's windowsill, or you'll just see them perching in a willow tree. So once again, keep your eyes open. These pictures were both taken here in Hershey's Mill. On the other end of the owl spectrum is the tiny screech owl. It can be either like a rust color or it can be gray. Again, both of these photos were here in Hershey's Mill. The screech owls we have them nesting in our wood duck boxes. We call them wood duck boxes, but screech owls like to use them. And that's where these two photos were taken. It says they're robin size. They're not shaped at all like a robin, so I was kind of surprised to read the dimensions. The length was pretty much the same, 9 inches. Their eyes are probably 40 times as big as a robin's eyes, but they are nice to come by. If you're walking by the paddle courts sort of in dusk and look off to the marshy side of the trail there, you can I wouldn't say frequently, but regularly see a screech owl peering out, especially if they're playing. He likes to watch. So, and I think the other place I've seen a screech owls in a box is down in the Quaker area, but they're fairly common here. And again, we have visitors from the north in the winter as well as the locals. can't miss the vultures. The turkey vultures are flying overhead practically every day of the year. They're very large. They have a hooked beak, which Rosemary Neary's picture shows quite clearly. They soar individually, finding prey. Once they find something, you may see groups soaring above, and they'll go in and feed on carrion in groups. The turkey vulture, as I said, has a red head. You can see it's shown here, not real blatantly, but it is red, whereas the black vulture has a black head. The main way to tell them apart, since mostly when you're going to see them is soaring overhead looking for a dinner, is that the turkey vulture has white in a triangular area on its wings and the rear part of its wings, whereas the black vulture just has white wing feathers at the end. The turkey vulture is more common. The black vulture is not uncommon, but less likely than the turkey vulture. Also note that the turkey vulture has an angle on its wing, whereas the black vulture is relatively straight across. Okay, we were talking before about the garden hawk. The garden hawk that we refer to mostly is the red-tailed hawk. It's a very common hawk around this area. It's common year-round. There is one that hangs out in the garden area and seems to feel like it is definitely a Hershey's Mill neighbor. You'll see juveniles will not have as nice white breast with this belly band as the adults, but the red tail is a very good marker. Notice it does not have stripes in its tail as some of the other ones I'll show you do. It is also very large compared to some of the other hawks we have. Other very common hawk is the red-shouldered hawk. This one also can be seen fairly frequently down in the garden area, as well as in some of the more wooded areas. Again, these pictures were taken right here. Well, not the flying one, but these two pictures were taken here in Hershey's Mill. You can see the red shoulder on the one on the left, and in the one in the center, you can see that the tail is banded as it is in the flight picture. It also notably has a chestnut-colored breast and some chestnut coloring on its wings. It's smaller than the red tail, but it's still a substantial sized hawk. So the things you need to look for if you want to distinguish between these two are what the tail looks like and the breast. Cooper's hawk is another one of our common ones. Again, it's smaller than the two previous ones. It sometimes is perched around in trees around bird feeders. Historically is called a chicken hawk because it did like to steal chickens from people that were raising them. So that's why it tends to prey on the birds coming to your bird feeder. That you notice here, this also has a striped tail. Doesn't have a so much of a chestnut breast as the red-shouldered hawk, more modeled. But there's a great variation in the way they look from whether they're juveniles or adults or males or females. So if it's not a red-shouldered and it's not a red-tailed, my bet would be that it's a Cooper's hawk. So just, there are other hawks too, but since this is a beginners, I'm talking about what you're most likely to be seeing. Except for the bald eagle, which you're not most likely to see, but if it's here, you'll see it. It is huge and they are around. They're very large, 1.5 times as large as the vulture, that you can get a good gauge on how big that is. It soars, someone described it as looking like an iron, a flat iron that you would iron your clothes with. I've never been able to see that, but just remembering that it's completely flat is a good thing. It has a white tail and a white head, unless it's a juvenile. And then again, it's coloration wouldn't be as distinct, but you could definitely see it's quite large, and the way the wings are spread, it's the front part of the wings is very, very straight, and they do soar extremely flat. It's very difficult not to mistake it for something else. Another fish-eating bird, the eagles eat fish, is an osprey. It's larger than the red-tailed hawk, smaller than the eagle, but it's very distinctive by the very, very accentuated angle on its wing, and it's largely white coloring. We've had them flying around here occasionally. I did see one did catch a fish, and an eagle came in to steal the fish from the osprey. So the two of them, although they're rare, they provide very memorable experiences. Okay, I'm calling these birds of prey. They're not raptors, but we'll go into a little bit of the other birds that forage for vertebrates, put it that way. And the great blue heron is here most of the time. You'll see him wading in any one of the ponds that we have, looking for fish, but also you can see him around the lagoon area catching a mole occasionally, a vole occasionally. Might be a mole too, but these were all Hershey's Mill pictures, and you can see all seasons of the year. No problem observing them. They forage individually, but then they go to communal roosts at night. Probably there's one over by the Bryn Mawr Rehab Center. So our residents may disappear there at nighttime. The belted kingfisher. If you're ever walking by, by the stormwater pond on the North Trail, and you hear a very screechy loud voice, stop and take a look at the different perching areas over that drainage area. And you'll eventually see the kingfisher. And you can stand there and you'll watch him go diving, but he's got this loud, screechy voice. Just stop in your tracks and track him down. An interesting thing is that the female is more colorful than the male. The one over on the two pictures on either side of this slide are both females. You can see the chestnut color on their breast and the brighter color banding that they have. The one on the right is actually bluer and was taken here in Hershey's Mill. I think the one on the left with the fish in its mouth is probably a variant from another area, but ours tend to be very blue. And the one in the center is a male. Again, you can see very more monocolor in the gray and no chestnut on the breast. Very long, thick beak and interesting kind of crest. So you can't miss them, and they're a great joy to watch. And the last bird of prey that I'll talk about are the flycatchers. Actually, they're not going after vertebrates, they're going after flies, flying insects. But unlike the swallows and that we talked about earlier, they don't soar around catching the flies. They'll tend to perch and dart out after them. And two very common ones that we have, not as common as our robins and some of our other birds, but compared to other flycatchers, would be the eastern phoebe and the great crested flycatcher. The great crested they're actually the same size, which surprises me, but one of them, the phoebe, is a little rounder and puffier, and the great crested is slender and stretched out more. And the great crested tends to perch high on trees. You see it on the spruce trees. And from there, it will dart out after its insect prey. As the eastern phoebe, you'll see more in shrubby areas over wetland areas. I see it in the Pond south of the lagoon, and also in the North Trail by that pond too. You can hear recognize its voice by its sound. It cries Phoebe, Phoebe. It's not too difficult to hear. And if you do hear it and stand still for a while, you'll probably see it darting out. I don't talk much about calls of birds. I'm not very good at it, but I will tell you that if you get the app Merlin on your phone, you can play the app and it will identify birds by sound, which is a great advance in bird watching and bird listening, and has been a great help to me, not being very musical. So there are many ways you can learn about birds, and I hope this has helped you. You can get, for refreshers, some very nice posters from the Cornell Ornithology Lab. And with that, I'll open it to questions.
So you all can unmute yourselves. Don't be shy. Unmute yourself and ask Christine anything you'd like. And Christine, thank you so much. I always find this so interesting, and I don't consider myself a birder, but this is always interesting.
By the way, Sherry, you're past your
Yes, I know.
okay.